Peninsula School District Board of Directors Study Session to order. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Glory, you want to lead us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so next we have the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, I request a motion to approve the agenda.
I approve,
Okay, it's been moved.
give a motion to approve the agenda. I request a motion.
Been
Give a
moved by,
motion to approve.
did I have a second?
I'll second that.
And seconded by Chuck. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The agenda is approved. Okay, it's on there twice. Okay. Okay, so then we move to, where did that? Consent agenda. Okay. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda prior to the vote? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved by Lori. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Deb. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, all opposed? Consent agenda's been approved. Okay, so at this time, I asked Dr. Jarvis if he could discuss a couple issues, so I'm going to yield to Dr. Jarvis.
Thank you, President Wilson. I've been asked to address a couple of issues, but I suppose with some facetious notion, we're not going to allow the governor and the state superintendent to speak anymore on board days. Today, the rest of the state moved to where we were planning to be for the fall, and I'm grateful for that. What we saw today from the Department of Health at the state level, followed by Chris Rakegall in the Office of the State Superintendent of Public Instruction, also followed by then Governor Inslee talking about what's happening, and the CDC as they addressed a number of issues. They all have a certain impact on what we're talking about, and that is the fall. The first and probably to me the most important thing we have been sharing for probably the better part of 2 months and maybe longer, that our intent was to return full-time in the fall and 5 days a week. We heard an across-the-board endorsement of that from the Department of Health, the governor, and the state superintendent. Everyone is saying that's number one. The kids need to be in school full-time in the fall, and that's where we're headed. They did then also clarify some of the guidelines that have been talked about, and they're coming out. And I want to talk very quickly about a couple of the guidelines that seem not to be continuing in the fall. One of those being attestation, one of those being temperature taking. So it does change the ability of the school district, particularly in our largest schools, not to have a huge group of students trying to enter the door at the same time, and us trying to figure out how do we take temperatures of those who forgot the forms or it didn't work. So that's a pretty significant one. You had already heard about the reduction to 3 feet of the social distancing. There is still clarification floating around out there that trying to address what will the situation be in September as far as 6 foot versus social distancing. The guidance from the Department of Health is to prepare 2 plans. To prepare one plan that would assume there are no social distancing requirements, and a second plan that would say if outside of the classroom there are areas that need 6 foot distancing, that be part of the plan that we have in place. As you'll hear tonight, that is part of our plan, and we're certainly not assuming anything on that one. If in fact the 6 foot requirement is still in place for something like lunches, then we will find ways of doing that. I was on a Zoom today with Dr. Chen and the Department of Health talking about that very issue, and right now nobody knows, but their conversation ranges all the way from Tacoma Pierce County Health Department purchasing very large tents for school districts to have a place at lunch if we need to have some kids covered. I can't say that was wildly welcomed by the superintendents, the solution. But my point would be that if that's there in place, then we have to have a social distancing. We will have that in plan, and we'll again hear that tonight. I think the main piece that is there is that one that we will be operating full. As you know, we've been surveying, we've got for the presenters to talk about a flavor of our parents, but predictably we have a lot of parents who will want to be in person, and they will have welcomed what they heard today. I think basically the messages across the board will be favorable. One of the pieces you may get asked is, what about the masks? CDC has suggested that masks can be removed for vaccinated persons, but there's a very specific statement in today's announcements at the state level that masks will continue to be required in the school. It is not their intent to remove the mask requirement. I won't speak for them, but I think the issue there is that they don't believe we can have all the kids vaccinated by the fall, and I think that's probably pretty true. So the reality is the mask will continue to be part of what we do. And then I want to add a piece that's also just come up in basically the last 48 hours. It doesn't have to do with the fall, it has to do with the finishing this year. The good news is that we again have for quite some time been shooting towards an in-person graduation for our students. The downside was that it became more and more clear that virtually 20 of the 24 schools that would be graduating the Tacoma Dome pulled out and removed themselves for a variety of reasons. But at the heart of it, where most of the change took place, was that the Tacoma Dome trying to operate in concert with the state was suggesting that there would be separate sections for vaccinated and unvaccinated in the families, and that for the unvaccinated, there would then be a proof of tests required within 72 hours. And just taking those 2 points for a minute, you can picture what that does to a family that's trying to attend graduation and sitting 2 by 2. Somebody's in the upper deck, somebody's in the lower deck, and the upper deck is on the other side because that's the non-vaccinated side. We followed the lead of a number of other schools and said that would be havoc for us and for our parents. The other factor, frankly, was financial, that we had 2 of the final 4 high schools still scheduled for the Tacoma Dome. The Tacoma Dome refigured the cost of presenting the graduations and decided to then assess that on the 4 remaining schools in total rather than the 24 high schools. So our costs, as I did some calculations and tried to figure out what the difference was, took our cost alone for the 2 high schools to just under $50,000 for graduation. So a very steep increase. Simultaneously, one of the big changes at the Tacoma Dome was the Tacoma School District decided then to go outdoors, do their own thing, and set it up at the Mount Tahoma site. I frankly called up Tacoma School District and people I work with there, and I said, describe to me what you're doing and whether or not the door is open for us to be able to join you. What became apparent was that there were 5 dates. They were using 3 of those dates. There was one right in the middle of that on the 12th of June that was available to us, and we could move from the 19th to the 12th, keep the same time, keep the same basic. We knew instantly that would also, that move of 1 week would leave some people in a difficult spot because they had certainly been preparing for the 19th. Some of the logic that I applied, I'm just going to own that, was that until just a few days ago, we were looking like we were going to go into phase 1 in Pierce County. Both the case number and the hospitalization numbers were above the phase one, and that was on the horizon. If we went into phase one, we would not be able to do an in-person graduation. So at that point, we, and I want to look at Director Kristen Dawson there, had been working on a backup plan for probably 4 months now in terms of a car parade, a drive-through, some other alternative. I knew the dates for that alternative were on the 13th of June as an alternative, so when I looked at the 12th, I factored that in, and frankly, went to the place of the graduation weekend and recognized that we did leave somewhere. We left people on a plane the next week, but we grabbed that and said we will go through. And we start with the cost. The Tacoma School District has said to me, we'll just prorate the cost. They've invested about $50,000 in audio, visual, and the stands, the platform. So prorated share of that may well be $10,000 or less, so a substantial difference. But the biggest of all is that they will be set up, and they've got approval for it to be operating in family pods or guest pods of 6. And every graduate will have 6 people that can attend. If there are extra pods that we can tell, then there will be some extras. But we're starting with that. So I specifically inquired if we have 350 or 370 graduates times 6. Are we capable of housing that? And the answer is yes. I don't know if any of you have spent time in the Oklahoma Stadium, the football stadium, but it has 2 full, both sides of the stadium, good viewing, and the large scoreboard is a live television monitor. And so we ended up with live streaming, the full audio visual, the full platform, 2,000 guests if we go there, and we did have to inconvenience people that would be caught on that on the 12th, and that was the downside. But I took that on myself, and I just said, yes, we're going to make that switch. We had to withdraw from the Tacoma Dome right away, or we were going to be charged anyway. And we simply did not, really at the heart of it was, we did not want to divide our groups into vaccinated and unvaccinated, proof of tests, and try to make that work for anybody. So right now the plan is that the weekend of the 12th and 13th we'll have an in-person graduation. We'll keep the same times that schools were planning on for that Saturday and the 12th. And then on Sunday the 13th is the car parade, and we recognize that some will choose to go one and not the other. But we think probably, particularly in the absence of any in-person graduation last year, that we'll see a pretty hefty turnout for the 12th. I guess I would offer that as I did it. I didn't bring it to you because I didn't have time, and B, I just felt that was not the administrative decision that I really needed to bring it to you and own it. So are there any comments or questions? I've got others here that can also try to answer that. I will accept questions, comments, whatever.
I have 2 questions. Okay. First, a comment. I think, like so many things during this whole experience, it's bittersweet, because the date change has to be extremely disappointing for a lot of people, and just challenging, obviously. However, canceling graduation is just bitter. So, take the bittersweet. And I appreciate all of your efforts, and this is my hope that we can find some other solution here, I'm sure, as was all of our. My 2 questions are just clarifying questions, because I think I know the answer, but I think it's really important for people to understand about the date change, because it is going to be very difficult for some. I assume that the 19th is not available in the new venue because the rented, like the staging and the Jumbotron or whatever is being set up is for a very limited window, I'm guessing, right? For like 5 or 6 days maybe?
the short answer is we would actually have to hire a professional outfit, the same that we would call the dome or other big events. And to do that in that short time and reverse everything was not seen as something, and it was going to be tremendously expensive to try to do that. So both the logistics and the cost seemed to be prohibitive on being able to put that together. And then ultimately was the seating and the capacity issue of trying to do that, for example, our own field, and that simply didn't allow us to gain or the benefit to make that work. We still would have been very limited in the number of people that could be there. Probably, and I think we calculated that we probably would be up to two people per attendee.
At the dome.
I'm sorry.
The whole, at the.
Our own field.
Right, okay. Because that was my other question was then, wasn't it also true that the Tacoma Dome, in addition to all the other hurdles, was going to severely restrict attendance for families? Was that?
They opened up the possibility of, once the governor opened the door on that, big events, that you could have vaccinated and the unvaccinated. So that increased the numbers from what we were going to be. But it did it in a way that was so onerous that we literally followed the same thing we heard in the newspaper, saw in the newspaper, the public school district news, that we simply can't do that for our families.
Thank you.
I have a couple. Can you confirm, if you know this, is with the setup that they're going to have at Mount Tacoma, will there be a big screen and the graduates will be like actually up on the screen so parents can see wherever they're sitting in the stadium?
The gentleman on the telephone, Mr. Dan Gregory, is actually our point person working through some of those details. So
Okay.
I invite the voice to appear
Yeah.
in the answer.
Dan, did you hear my question?
Well, we have to turn it
Andy's
back
on hold, so he needs to be.
The reality is that the scoreboard at Mount Tacoma Stadium is a live television screen.
Okay.
So it can be, it doesn't have the quality of this kind of screen. It's a little grainier, but basically it is live. And I'm assuming that that's going to be one of the things they use. I do not know if there's another large screen anywhere.
Okay.
Dan, are you there?
That's okay.
I'm here. Can you hear me now? Give me a thumbs up if you can.
We
Yes, we
can,
can
they're
hear
giving you
you.
a thumbs up. Do you know if the graduates will be on the big screen?
If you're ready for me, I can answer that.
Yes.
One of the questions that we'll be submitting to the point person is about live streaming and about the screen. That's an assumption we have, but we are working to verify that within the next day or two.
Dan, can you also add to that request that not only is it live stream, but it is, we have the capability of recording it? Because I know a lot of families have parties on the 19th, people flying in, and it would be great to be able to have that recording, sit there with your graduate, with your party. The people coming into the party weren't going to graduation anyway, but they were there for the party. So the party can still happen. The recording of the graduation could be, you know, at their house and the graduates there with them. So I'm hoping the request of recording can be happen.
I do about a 99%
Christian,
sure.
I have a list of questions. I have not sent those off to the point person yet. I will add the question about recording of the event to the list of questions I'll be sending.
Thank you, Dan.
On that volume button, you can't, right in front of you there.
Okay.
Thank you, and then you'll just communicate out as you find these answers through the
We
district.
most certainly will.
Okay.
We most certainly will. Yes, Amy Gordon did a nice job with our communication today. We don't have all of the answers yet, but that's exactly why in her message, I believe she indicated more information to come.
Okay.
I'll add that to the questions, and in our next push of information, we'll include the answer to that question.
Okay, thank you. And being a parent of a senior this year, I'm thinking through all of this, and it would be great if Amy could put if the recorded link could be on the PSD/graduation. So if I'm going to send out something to my family now, say you can go ahead and watch it live stream, and the link will be here, PSD/graduation, whatever that if we could get that information out to families, so they can mail that out, because currently our announcements say the 19th. So we want to provide as much information that families can share with their extended families, and it might end up being great because they get to see that. But I think we can get that late.
Most certainly, not regardless of the recording, well, included with the recording that we want to have so people can watch it on the 19th.
Yeah.
We kind of assume that some people will not be traveling from out of state, and so if we can get the live stream link right on the email that goes to families, then that can be there for everybody on the day of or the week after. Either way, we want to make it as easy as possible for people to connect.
Thank you, appreciate that. And then Art, this may go back to you, and you may not have an answer. So if our seniors are graduating on the 12th, what happens to the week after that they're supposed to be going to school?
The school board, you all, will be asked to approve our request for a waiver at the state level because the seniors will miss 3 days of school that they would not have missed if they were, they're allowed to miss 5 days, up to 5 days of school more than the other students. So 180 minus 5 is 175. In this case, their school year comes out to 172. There is a certain laughter as you try to figure out this year's school days and how many days the kids have missed. But you will be asked to approve the waiver request on the 27th. They'll go to the state board and we will be officially shortening their school year by 3 days. If for any reason that's not approved, we will have activities for the seniors that they can return to for school days for that week. I don't know if you've been there in the past.
What activities you like to do?
We have yearbook signing. We have, I don't want to make too light of it, but the reality is that generally speaking, the attendance is not great.
Well, I would say that after the kids have missed pretty much their senior year, they may want to, so.
Well, if you think that attendance is a little bit poor now, especially after graduation from seniors, I don't know if a lot of them would show up for those extra days.
Yeah.
I think communication went out today that the 11th was the last day for seniors.
Oh, did it? I didn't see it.
I think I saw something like that.
There have been some really clever solutions to that problem over the years when weather changes and there are makeup days that get inserted at the end of the year. And so school districts have found themselves somewhat regularly in having a group of kids that were short. And therefore, the high schools find ways to add days, and they're very irregular. They're after the school year is out.
I have a question, a couple, and actually, I will call you out. Yesterday, Dr. Jarvis and me told us the news that I expected to hear from your parents. I was not expecting you, meaning me, to be the first one. So speaking on behalf of this senior parent, we are a family that's been impacted in such that dad might not be able to attend with this change. So I understand the hardship that people are facing, and I wanted to put forth a request that I have heard from several parents today, and I want to know if you have considered moving the car graduation to the 19th, even with all of the work that's gone on to accommodate those families that can't be there on the 12th.
We have not had that conversation. So the conversation we had was to keep it on the 13th and make the weekend a celebration. I certainly am willing to have that conversation. I don't know what that might entail in terms of competing activities or permits or permission or really interest or advisability. It can be explored. We're not, that car parade is ours to determine, other than we have to get assistance from the city. So I'm willing to talk to them.
So what would be the advantage, Natalie, of moving the car parade to the 19th?
So for those people who had all the family coming in for the 12th, for the parties and such,
Yeah.
or for those who can't see it,
Yeah.
can they attend?
So I can check to see if we could, not to change it yet another day, but it would have to be on the 20th, because the YMCA, we're highly being dependent on the YMCA, and the YMCA is open on Saturday and not on Sunday and Friday, so.
And it might not.
And it might get changed as well, so it's another story I have to think about now.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can certainly ask the question, but that would be that caveat, it would be the Sunday, not the Saturday.
Okay.
Did you guys have any questions?
Mine are kind of, my question, first off, thank you. I realize that you're juggling and you're
Have done, I think, a fantastic job of working with the families and the kids and figuring out credit shortages and credit waivers and what have you. So, to my knowledge, I'm going to ask Dan and John to jump in because they've been both deeply engaged in this. We are, in essence, getting a normal graduation. There will be certain students who simply didn't make it across the line, but there are lots of kids that have been assisted in credit makeups and situations where they are graduating, the way it should be, appropriately. This is what I'm searching for. So I'm pleased to say that, Chuck, we're not seeing a fall off of a significant percentage or number of kids who didn't make it because of the pandemic and because of the credit shortages, et cetera. It's if there were ever one of those times you want to praise the high school counselors. The high school counselors have been saints. If you can't see their halo, it's only because we're not looking, because they really have. They have done everything you and I would expect to help the kids and help the families. So, John and Dan, if you have numbers or percentages, I don't. But I know that.
Here, you can get back to us on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if Dan's going to chime in, but I can say I just talked with Michelle at Gig Harbor today about that, and she confirmed what Dr. Jarvis just said, that they're expecting it to be what would be kind of a typical year for graduation. Obviously, we want 100%, but we're not seeing a significant dip at all in the number of graduates. And again, it goes back to a lot of people really do going the extra mile to help students and get where they need to be.
the couple that I know of, it sounds like we just lost them totally mid-year.
Yeah, and there are a few of those.
Yeah. So I don't know
I guess
if I could reach out.
we're not quite ready to get to the next part of it. Part of what you're going to hear will be the summer and what we're trying to do for kids. There were some kids who walked away from school this year.
That's what I've.
They not only are not graduating, they're going to need help to figure out how to get on track.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, are you have anything from PHS on that?
I don't have any direct numbers from PHS from Joe yet, but what I would say is to, again, echo what Dr. Jarvis had indicated. Our counselors have been very good about exercising the state waivers on credits that were provided. They've been very intentional. It hasn't been a free pass. Additionally, with rating the focus on essential standards that Ms. Whitner has referred to earlier, we've pared back some of the curriculum to those essential standards, which has allowed us to focus with our students and really make sure that they are not leaving us unprepared. They will be prepared to tackle whatever it is they choose to tackle as they leave school. So with the waivers and everything else, we're going to be in good shape. And again, credit to our counselors for being very intentional about leveraging those waivers.
Thanks.
Okay. Well, first I echo what everybody else said. It's unfortunate that, last year's senior, before I speak, how about you, Touch, you got anything you want to add?
I don't have any questions that haven't already been answered, of course, because all of my questions got answered when you were first speaking. There were a few people who were texting me, asking me about, and expressing their frustrations about how, and the discomfort and the weird positions that they were put in, but hearing all the different situations, I don't really think that there was anything else that could have been done, because it's either you have a graduation that some family people miss because they can't fly in, or you have them fly in and then not be able to attend the graduation at all. And so, I don't know, it's just, people were just upset about the date change because of the different family members who weren't able to come in, but there was, as you guys have said, there wasn't much that could have been done about that.
Yeah.
it seems like.
I think there was a lot of angst when we found out that they were going to separate families by vaccination rates and things like that. And I just think that would have created some set of problems. And I think no matter what would have happened, it would have upset somebody. Somebody would have been upset. I wanted to appreciate Dr. Jarvis with his comments from earlier, because I wanted to bring some of those up tonight before we got into the study session, was, as you mentioned, Dr. Jarvis, the CDC today stated that fully vaccinated people no longer are required to wear masks. This is from the CDC today. Vaccinated individuals are no longer required to wear masks while indoors or outdoors, or be required to physical distance in large numbers or small gatherings. The CDC director said today they are following the science. Just want to point that out. President Biden today, who has routinely double masked for the entire year or during COVID, removed his mask today during his press conference for the very first time and told everyone in the room that they could remove their mask if they had been vaccinated. So I just wanted to point that out, which was interesting. Last year in 2020, when this all started, I was really proud of our school board because we pushed back against the mixed messages that came from the U.S. Department of Health, from the OSPI, from the governor's office, from the Department of Health. There were so many mixed messages last summer that we had to wade through. And, you know, we were able to handle that pressure, and we pushed back hard enough. Not so hard that we destroyed every relationship in the world, but we pushed back. We had kids in school on day one, and one of the few in Western Washington had kids in school on day one. And that was amazing, the way the school district and the board and everyone worked together on that. Another interesting aspect, the CDC came out today. The president or the head of the American Federation of Teachers, which is the second largest teachers union in the country, after the CDC report came out, said that all schools should be open 5 days a week of in-person learning for the next academic year, which came out after the CDC announcement. She said conditions have changed. We can and must reopen schools in the fall for in-person teaching, learning, and support, and we must keep them open fully and safely 5 days a week. And it was Randy Weingarten, and she went on to say, given certain circumstances, nothing should stand in the way of fully reopening our public schools and keeping them open. And then she said prolonged, which we've known all along, prolonged isolation is harmful to our students. And it also, as Dr. Jarvis pointed out today, another mixed message which we're used to from OSPI. OSPI sent an email today to all the superintendents of the state and said OSPI, Department of Health, and Governor's Office expect all students to have opportunity to attend school in person full time. He went on to say the following mandatory mitigation will continue to be in place. And one of those was face coverings, ventilation, cleaning, disinfecting, and responding. So CDC, President, head of the teachers union all said no more mask wearing, no required social distancing if you've been vaccinated. And I'm pretty certain that 90% or more of our staff, teachers and staff, have been vaccinated. You can look into that, but I'm pretty sure it's 90% of our staff and teachers have been vaccinated. The governor today, the governor.
Can I ask a point of contention?
What?
So on our agenda,
Yeah.
this was not on our agenda, and we didn't change the agenda to discuss this. I'm just wondering, great conversation. I just want to make sure, are we okay to be doing this conversation without having it on the agenda?
We're just having a discussion about what happened with high school graduation and what caused it. And so I was just bringing up, he brought up the CDC and all the changes that happened today, and I was just piggybacking off of what the open discussion was.
Maybe we should have put that on the agenda then.
We can have it on the next board agenda. What?
Maybe we should put it on the future board agenda, because this is a good conversation to have. But I would want our community to know we're having this conversation, where it's leading.
Okay.
I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm just asking.
Oh, the rest of the board think.
There's no vote in what we're doing, correct?
No, I was just expressing some comments, there's not a vote gonna be taken or anything, and it's public information about what happened with the CDC. I was just reading what happened publicly, what the CDC said today, what the governor said today, what OSPI said today about the mixed messages, and that some are saying we shouldn't have to wear masks. Some are saying we should, and I was just reading publicly what was put out today. So, if y'all wanna wait, we can.
No, I just didn't know if we needed to amend the agenda to have this conversation, because people don't know we're having it, is my only concern. Because I think I know where you're leading with this, and so I would like to make sure our public knows we're having this conversation.
Okay, what would you propose? How would
I
you-
don't know, at this point, can you, I don't know what needs to be done. Maybe not, maybe you can continue on. I just was making sure that we are doing everything correct.
Well, I know, I can save, if you want, I can save my comments. I mean, the agenda is to discuss academic and student well-being recovery plan and summer 21 academic plans. Where I was leading, and that was going to be something that I wanted to see happen prior to those taking place. But I can certainly hold my comments until after your presentation on the summer, and I'll just add these to that, piggyback to that comment. That way we don't have to do an agenda amendment. So I'm going to do that. I'll just wait.
Okay.
Again, I don't think to stop. I think it's a good conversation. I just didn't know if we were okay with it, given the current agenda.
Okay,
So,
I appreciate that. I'll just save the remainder of my comments till we're done with our study session.
Okay.
Okay, so next up then will be our study session. First one will be academic and student well-being recovery plan.
While Melissa and friends are moving to the table, by way of introduction to this section, you have heard, and perhaps the public has heard, that prior to June 1st, the district is to plan and publish a plan for how do we look at the academic recovery and implementation for the fall. And we have elected to combine our plan for the summer and the plan for the fall because we believe they work hand in hand on the student well-being and academic recovery. So while it's two parts, it really is all part of that. The state requested for a plan to be approved by the district and by the board would have this plan in front of you on the 27th of May, asking for your approval. And this is a chance for you to obviously learn about it, ask questions, explore it, and direct us if you see something you'd like to see added. Part of what OSPI and the state has requested is a very technical piece that talks about hours and time and tools and instruments. We wanted to make sure that what was presented to you and the public really is fully understandable as our plan for the fall. I started being a little facetious at the beginning that it was nice to have all of the powers that be in the state agree with us on what we're presenting tonight. But the reality is we intend to show you that we will be fully in compliance. We will be in fact fully in person. We're surveying parents to try to have them help us on planning numbers so that we know what their interests are. And it is our pleasure to present to you our plan for the Peninsula School District Academic and Student Well-Being Recovery Plan. And it will be in front of you for approval on the 27th. So, Melissa, I believe you are introducing the plan.
I am introducing the plan, and I apologize if my back is to you. All right. So what we're presenting is the plan basically gives us another opportunity, an additional opportunity for us to
On the side, off and on the side.
to reflect and capture the work that we did in this school year, and using that information and data that we've collected to plan for next year. In the presentation, we're going to share the reviews of this current school year, and we're also going to share with you what the plans then are for next school year. And we will also be taking any questions or comments at the end. So anything that you would like to see, as Art said, or that we haven't included for this plan. This is not what is sent to the state. We have a template that we fill out, and that's what we'll fill out. There's a lot of other check boxes of data and subgroups and things like that that we answer. So this is our overall presentation to all of you. All right, so next up. Yeah. So you would, but it is tied to the ESSER funding, and it does have to be approved by you. And after it's approved, we have to put it on the webpage, and it's probably different than the one you had, yes. We shortened it to give you more of an overview, not all the nuts and bolts. So, but there you have the nuts and bolts. This is,
Thank you.
You bet, yes. This is a much preferable, yes. All right, come on.
John,
So,
Dan wants to be connected.
They're 3 seconds behind.
Delayed.
should I go?
I think so.
Okay. All right, so I will jump in with this slide. This slide talks a little bit about some of the supports that were in place this school year for students. So I'll just touch on a couple of these things really quickly. At the start of the school year in August, September, we made sure that we had social emotional learning materials and resources and training for our students, K through 12. So we invested in that, did some training with that in August before we started the school year. And also, on that second point there, when we started in September, we prioritized in-person learning for those students who were furthest from educational justice and those who had the most barriers to remote learning. So we made some plans for our reopening activities to make sure that we got those students as early as someone noted this afternoon in school on September 8th.
And so it's really kind of thinking about the sports in two different buckets. One is the ones John just described as those academic and well-being type of sports for students. But in addition, we did a lot of supports for families just on a basic level. The third one down on the right side there is one to really highlight is the meals that we provided throughout the year. Really going above and beyond our food service from Sodexo, spent countless hours above and beyond what they normally would to make sure that every student, not just the students that would normally have qualified for free and reduced lunch, were able to get those meals. In addition, we know that there was a lot of kids that weren't able to be successful because of technology reasons. So again, it was going out, getting hotspots, providing additional hardware, providing support for software, everything it took to make sure that every student was able to connect and be successful in a remote setting. So those were a couple of the kind of non-in-school social or academic supports that we provided as well. So the thinking is then taking these supports and then building on that for next year.
So like John said, everything you saw on that previous slide, building upon that for next year, and some of the things that we will do, some of the work we'll engage in for the 21-22 school year is focused on our ongoing work with inclusive practices and multi-tiered systems of support. So we're currently in the second year of a 2-year grant with WASA that focuses on inclusive practices, which at its core is really ensuring equitable access to grade level standards and content and tier 1 instruction for all students. So we hope to continue that work to ensure equitable access for all students, and that includes our ongoing work with early literacy. And like I said, continue our work with MTSS. We're also in the second year of a 5-year plan with multi-tiered systems of support.
John, on
yes.
behalf of somebody out there who does not know what MTSS stands for.
My apologies. Multi-tiered systems of support. So it's an integrated system of both social emotional learning and academics. And the focus of that is really strong core tier 1 instruction for both social emotional learning, behavior, and reading, writing, and math for all students, with tiered interventions and enrichment opportunities for those that need something more or something different. So our work prior to this school year and during this school year has been again on social emotional learning. And we're starting to layer in a focus on reading and early literacy, and we'll continue that work moving into next year to make sure that we have a strong foundation for
for all students, and then depending on the data that we collect, academically, social, emotionally, we'll provide tiered supports for those students to make sure that we close that opportunity and achievement gap.
And that's for K-12.
So as we look at some of these specific supports that we're going to be talking about, we want to start with that first one in bold, is to just make sure that we emphasize to everybody that we're talking about 5 days a week, full school. The one below that, transitional kindergarten, is one that you heard Lisa Ray present a couple months ago. This is a new opportunity for students who don't qualify by age for kindergarten at the beginning of the year, but would mid-year, and might not have had access to the kind of early learning supports that they normally would have. So mid-year, we would provide an additional opportunity for those kids to kind of get up to speed, so that when they start kindergarten in the fall of 22, that they will be ready for kindergarten. So that would be a new additional support that we'd be adding this year. That John hinted at is that we're really looking, we know that foundational reading is really, that's so critical to everything that we do. And so we have been already in the spring working with our K through 2 teachers on some additional training around early literacy. And that's going to continue throughout next year, so it's going to be one of those MTSS focus areas. So it's going to, because we know not in any year it's critical, it's going to be even more so now with what's happened last year. Another piece to highlight is the community partnerships. We're going to continue those and expand them when we can. That includes things like our partnerships with YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, Community in Schools, and many other groups. And then the bottom right one is another one you've heard in detail, is trying to be innovative in our thinking around how we organize the academies at Henderson Bay and how that can provide some additional supports that we haven't done in the past.
So also included in the plan is how we're going to continue to monitor both what we're doing for students to promote academic and social well-being, as well as really look at that through an equity lens and make sure that we're helping all students, not just a large chunk of students. So as we look at our academic measures for next year, one of the big ones that we'll be looking at very closely is our DIBELS assessment, against an acronym for an oral reading assessment. So it's really a teacher or reading specialist sitting down with a child, listening to them read, taking some measurements to really get an idea of how is that student doing in terms of their progress towards early literacy goals. We also have the opportunity next year to take smarter balance tests in the fall. It's an opportunity, that's what I'm going to try to sell it as. So I think a benefit to that is that we can really start using that as a growth measure of the instruction that happened within the year. So for students in grades 4 through 9, really, but we'll have that growth measure at grades 4 through 8. They'll be taking in the fall a shortened version of what the state would have normally asked them to do in the spring. And then they'll also take their previously scheduled assessment in the spring. So that'll give us a real opportunity to look at that. We're fortunate that the state's assessment, Smarter Balance, is designed on a scale that will let us look at growth in a pretty clear way. And so we have high hopes for that. We'll also be measuring 9th grade on-track grades. We know that 9th graders being on track for graduation that's really one of the best predictors that we have of who will be ready for graduation in a few years. And as we look at those, we'll be looking at those not just sort of as whole rates at the district or school level, but also breaking them up by program to look at the success of students who are enrolled in free and reduced price lunch, the students who are enrolled in receiving EL services, and then the students who are on individual education plans and receiving special education supports, to really look at sort of where are those equity gaps. In addition, one of the focuses the state and federal government had asked for in the ESSER plan is a focus on racial equity. Most of our schools don't have enough students fitting different groups for us to really look at that and report in a detailed way. What we tend to see is if we see a student who's doing really well and is in a different racial group, it's often that student might be the only student who's in that group in that school, which gets pretty tough to look at and in the aggregate. So as we look at data from our panorama surveys on social emotional learning and our attendance rates, we'll be breaking those out and looking at, when we can at a district level, different racial and ethnic groups, but also kind of comparing attendance and survey responses between white and non-white students, because that then does give us group sizes that are large enough for us to really look at in a meaningful way.
Questions?
I have a ton of questions. Good luck, school. I'll just start, and they might have been answered as Joe was writing. Can you just give us an example of, when you say inclusive practices, you say equitable access. So what does that look like? So for example, early literacy, who's responsible for identifying that? And give us an example of what equitable access means and what's a tier?
I can give you, let me give you an example of an inclusionary practice, a general inclusionary practice, say at a middle school in a science class. So we want all of our students to be able to access the content in a science class, so inclusionary practices allow for multiple ways for students to engage in the content. So it may not be traditional, sit, read a textbook, but multiple ways of media, using media, text, podcasts, different ways to engage in that content, and then different ways for students to report their understanding of that content. So it could be traditional, write a paper, or I make a podcast myself, or I do a slides presentation, or I have different ways to demonstrate my learning and mastery of the material. So those practices, when put into place, allow more students to access that grade level content.
Okay, and so these are things that are built into, say, an assignment at a middle school, if we're talking middle school science. Or is it the responsibility of the teacher to notice someone who's just not successful in the traditional delivery system and then have to come up with a tier on his or her own?
That's a good question. So that's a part of the training that we hope to engage in. So it's training with teachers to provide them the resources and ability to provide those multiple ways of engaging and representing. So yes, we collect data as a classroom teacher through the various measures that some of which James alluded to, and then based on where kids are at, we have different ways for them to engage in the content. So that's a training piece, and making sure teachers have the resources to be able to access those types of things.
Okay, so it's just somewhat observation-based, because I'm wondering if we have a lot of kids who have fallen behind, not necessarily in need of additional supports, how do we differentiate those two groups? So, those who just, haven't been reading or following up due to extended remote learning versus those who really need something more.
And I just say real quick, I think some of that example of science at the middle school level, we are going to have students who maybe missed out and have gaps due to that. We might have students who have trouble engaging in the content due to their reading ability that might be a couple of years behind. So again, some of the assessments that James alluded to, like DIBELS or iReady, that gather that information will help us make a decision about why is the student having a difficult time with this content, and then will help us determine what interventions will be most appropriate.
John, can I chime in a little bit here, the phone on the desk?
Yeah.
Natalie, I think those are great questions as my colleagues here were presenting. The language that's used in the report talks about how are you going to universally support all students, and how are you going to support targeted students who struggle the most. The reason I bring that up is it fits really well with our multi-tiered system of support efforts. And the reason I bring that up also is because we have to go in with the idea that all students have been affected by the pandemic. And they all need our support in both their academic and social well-being. And so the universal supports for all students, you'll see items on those slides that really apply to all students as we nurture them both socially and academically. And then you'll see some that are targeted at specific groups. And as we assess and go forward, some of that is with us coming to the understanding that not every standard is created equal, and we won't be back to every standard in the fall. We're still going to have to prioritize and really sift through and focus in on those standards that are most enduring. And that should give us the opportunity to meet the needs of all students and really target those who maybe have fallen behind more than others.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that?
if we are back in school 5 days a week full-time, why would we not anticipate full standards? Why are we approaching it with a select number of standards we're going to try to achieve? I can answer that as well. Anybody?
Okay.
So it's best practice, actually. There are actually about 20 years worth of standards to teach in 13 years. The standards were very broad and very comprehensive. So what we have done since the standards were released and adopted is to go in and say, what are the highest leverage, most bang for your buck, if you will, standards? And then there are substandards underneath. And so what we do is we select what are the standards that we see cycle through, and what standards are going to give us the most learning, and again, that is recursive. So essential standards and paring them down is something that we've always done. We just really, really focused on it this year.
Okay.
So, and teachers can certainly go beyond that.
Yeah.
Just not to say, oh, we're only teaching this, now you can teach more,
Yeah.
you can go more in depth.
So it's a standard practice we do outside of the COVID?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for the clarification. I don't.
Can I pick it back up? With
And I would just add, as James, I see James sitting there at the end of the table, he's the expert on this, but I think he would share with you that the state of Washington has more standards, or we're in the top 5, I believe, of the number of standards that we require for students.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm looking through the notes, it says that the board would have to approve the plan
Yes.
or it's sent in.
Yes.
I guess maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I don't really see in here anything yet for me to approve.
Right.
Because I'm like, what I'm looking at here doesn't tell me how is this going to help our students recover. When we were talking earlier, someone made a comment that around graduation, that we're not seeing a significant drop off year over year in our graduation rate. Where, you hear out there that a lot of students have really suffered with their grades due to remote and lots of failures and Fs and stuff like that. What is our normal graduation rate, like pre-COVID, what was our graduation rate of students? Does anyone just off topic guess? 86%?
About 86.
86, okay, so, right. Okay, so what are we anticipating it to be this year?
So this year's seniors at Gig Harbor and Peninsula need to leave out Henderson Bay and our alternative programs because they count credits differently. And that wasn't an on-the-fly calculation I could make, but out of those two schools, currently it's 92.8% are on track to meet credits when we take into account the state waivers that have been added in.
Okay, so we had a 6% increase in graduation rate during a 100-year pandemic.
Well, so that's our percentage of kids who are on track to graduate based on credits. Some of those students might be missing specific credits or have some specific challenges, but just in terms of credit totals, that's where we stand, is to have an
Okay,
increase in
so
graduation rate.
I would assume if our senior class is doing so amazingly well during the pandemic, our juniors and sophomores and freshmen are probably equally doing as well.
No, seniors are just that amazing. Trust
What?
me.
That's an amazing class, 2021.
I said you're doing incredibly well.
No, I know.
Then
It's just they're the exception, he's putting.
We'll add that to the plan.
Well, where I'm going with that is, this is a requirement by the state for districts across the state to provide intervention for all these our struggling students during the pandemic. And the Peninsula School District doesn't appear to have struggling students during the pandemic. So what are we going to be doing to recover? Because this just sounds like school as normal. So, I mean, are we just a very fortunate school district that we don't, I'm being serious, I'm not joking, I mean,
No, I know.
do we have
We
significant?
had a lot of state waivers though, as James pointed out. So typically you wouldn't have 92% if these waivers weren't applied.
Correct,
Right.
so so
During
let's
the
move
pandemic.
ahead to, okay, thank you, to 2021 or 2022, 21-22 school year. Are those waivers going away or are they going to stay in place?
They're currently set to expire at the end of this school year.
Okay,
The state board might choose to extend that. Our best guess is that they will choose to extend at least parts of that because next year's senior class has never yet had the opportunity to take a graduation assessment or a
Yeah.
graduation pathway. So we're likely to see some sort of grace given there.
Mhm.
We do have other measures besides graduation that do show some difference in performance. So I mentioned DIBELS earlier as an oral reading performance. Our DIBELS proficiency rates, particularly at first grade, are down markedly this year, which, again, thinking about some instructional time lost last spring and then the difference in instructional models this year is perhaps not too surprising. But that's one of the places where we really see a concerning drop is in our youngest students' oral reading.
We're also seeing some lower scores in mathematics, which is, we've seen in other districts as well. So as we think about the plans that we have, those may not be tier 3, intensive types of thing. That might just be, we need some students to get a little bit of extra support. And that can be done in the classroom or with some of the other supports that we've talked about. So I wouldn't say that we feel like we are at normal with our student performance, but we think some of the things that we've talked about, we're not talking, in most cases, it's not huge recovery, but it is recovery that needs to occur.
Okay, that's why some people have said that.
Might I just add and throw in there, when we looked at this report, it was like, oh my goodness, we got the call to do this report approximately maybe 6 weeks ago. When we looked at that, we needed to start with what we had already implemented this year because we haven't ignored student academic and well-being through the year. And that's why you have the slide there that talked about what we implemented in 2020, 2021. What was successful and what do we want to maintain? And then we've been planning for the coming year. I'm just on my screen looking at Lisa Ray sitting behind John and John there. You heard from her several weeks ago about the roadmap to success for some of our early learners. So really, as we complete this report, it's nothing that we said 6 weeks ago, oh, we've got to do this. We really had to look back at what we've already done and what we've already been planning and pull that together. Most of our work this year and the work we've been planning for next year has been around academic and social-emotional well-being for our students.
Okay.
Can I add a student example to this? That I appreciate the work that we're contemplating to recover. While I think students are graduating, I think that there were certain skills and standards that weren't taught this year. So like even the colleges are preparing for a different kind of student coming to them because there were English standards that were not taught to my daughter that she's going to lack at college now. And unless we realize that through K through 12, these kids will always kind of be behind. So still graduating, but they're not graduating the same student that they did.
That was what I was going to state, that some have said that our students will never catch up, especially our young learners. So I agree, thank you for pointing that out. I mean, our high school students are a little bit more emotionally and they're developed, with their frontal lobe, and the younger kids, they say, could take longer to catch up. And is that where we're going to see the highest need, is elementary school, as far as getting back to lost learning?
Possibly, although it's been proven time and time again across the nation that if we have targeted intervention and support, and we have a sense of urgency around it, we can close those gaps. You can close, you expect a year's worth of learning in a year. So what we have to say is, how do we increase that? How can we do a year and 3 months or a year and a half? How do we do that? And so it's going to take a little bit of time. The good news, David, is that we have time with our youngest learners. That doesn't mean we can be complacent. We really have to have a sense of urgency around this work. I'm not saying that we're going to not have fun and it's not going to be good, but we have to really think about what are the most critical standards and skills that our kids need, and how does that look moving forward. So it's really, for first graders, it's a 12-year plan, isn't it?
So is there any potential that the plan that you put forward, that the board votes on to move to send to OSPI to say, here's our plan to recover lost learning, can they say this isn't good enough and send it back, or is it just they want to know what we're going to do and that's the end?
I suppose it's always likely they can send it back, but
just curious if
they have that option. I think it'll be an incredibly well-written plan, and it'll be just fine.
I have no doubt. I have no doubt. I just was curious. Is there a standard for us to meet that the state expects us to get over a certain hurdle that
they didn't share a rubric with us.
It's obviously a new report. OSBI will sometimes, when you submit something, give you feedback and say, here's some things to maybe improve in this area, some things you might want to focus on this area, but they wouldn't necessarily send it back. They might just offer some suggestions.
So when you talk about those youngest readers, we've got expanded summer school, we've got the transitional kindergarten for the even younger students, we've got our MTSS plan, we've got small class sizes, we've got a lot of things
Yes.
in place to do that, and I'm confident that the state will see that.
Okay, thank you.
Just a real quick answer to your question. When we submitted the plans earlier in the year and they had to be approved by OSBI, they approved, I'm going to do some guessing here, but somewhere between 175 and 200 of those plans, they approved right away and just sent us a notice that they were approved. There were another 75 to 95 school districts that they had to make phone calls and make some adjustment, or the state found something that was missing in those plans. So I'm using that as probably a guesstimate of what will happen in the June 1st round, that there will be some follow-up if they see significant omissions from the plan that the district somehow missed in answering. Otherwise, you're probably looking at least 2/3 to 3/4 of the districts that will be approved right up front, and the balance will be negotiated by some other method. Sorry, Chuck, any other question?
So back to the seniors, you said we got a 92% graduation rate, so I'm assuming that's the currently enrolled students.
It's currently enrolled
So-
students who have enough credits.
So in the last 2 years, we've lost a lot of students in that, what was junior and then senior year. So that rate's kind of skewed.
Correct.
It's way lower. I don't know how many students we've lost. Have we tracked?
We've actually gained seniors.
They came back, okay.
Well, we have more seniors enrolled this year than we had juniors enrolled last year. That's the only grade where that's true, just to be clear.
Okay.
And it's more by, I think it's like 3 or 4 students across the district. It's not a large
Okay.
difference. So yeah, our actual graduation rate as reported eventually by the state is going to be based on the number of students and the specific students that we had who entered as 9th graders.
Right.
And so that reported rate will be different. One thing that we did see, again, because of similar waivers last year, statewide the graduation rate went up last year during the pandemic. So did ours.
Yeah.
That was, yeah, it was something that we saw
It was a gimme.
in most districts across the state.
Right. So I know there are students that walked away. And I know that our community has grown, so the increase is the growth that we've seen. But we've still lost a lot of kids. There's a lot of junior, senior kids. I know a couple that walked away, just said this was, I'm not gonna get a job. So what can we do to offer those kids some means of GED or something? Because they're gonna need this in life. You know, and in my mind, I think we owe them something.
I would point to one thing that we talked about with Aaron, and that's the Bridge Academy.
The what?
The Bridge Academy,
So they can come back.
that will provide it through age 21, so it would provide them an opportunity. And it is a way for us to reach out and have a one-on-one adult working with those students to figure that out.
Okay, are we going to reach out to them? Are we gonna try and make contact with those kids and say, this is available to you now?
I think if Erin O'Neill were here, she would rise in pride. They're
Yeah.
already seeing contacts
Okay.
of kids who've been on the street. I say kids that might be 19 years old.
Right.
Probably resent my calling them kids. But they're on the street and have not been in school for the last year or 2 years, and they're already being in contact with that. So we are launching the Bay Academy and the Bridge Academy and really the CTE, trying to wrap that in, as well as the Global Virtual Academy, so that we can reach out to kids in a variety of ways. But you're speaking towards one of those absolute 100% targets that we're trying to hit, that things we've not done before, and to the degree that we're also doing them.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I like where you're going with this, and I recognize it, I know, we're just gonna have to spend the extra time. Do we also know, so we had enrollment going on, how are those numbers looking? Are we getting a big group coming into kindergarten that skipped last year that's, where are we at on, anybody have any ideas where we're at on those enrollment numbers?
I think we heard this week that we were 30 students off of our last year's enrollment, and we started 3 or 4 weeks late. So we're not super far behind.
Okay.
I don't know the data on how many of those are kids who stayed out last year or just coming back. I also know that we have our kindergarten, James is going to talk about summer things in a minute, but we have our kindergarten jumpstart, kindergarten and first grade jumpstarts happening, and there's enrollment coming in left and right for that. In order to go to jumpstart, you have to be registered for school. So that's what I'm seeing, and I'm seeing a lot of those, and those are typically families who have not been engaged in our system yet. So they're not in preschool, they're not in, maybe they're in our, currently in our remote kindergarten as well. So we are seeing them, they're starting to come back. I don't have those hard numbers, but I did get that sense that it wasn't super far off of where we've been in the past.
I'll get myself in trouble trying to speak for Karen Anderson, but since she's not here, she was using the number a few days ago, so it's not up to date based on the survey. There were about 208 students who had newly registered beyond the kindergarten registrations. So if that were true and that was first, whatever it's been, 2 weeks of open registration, our target, of course, was set at, can we regain 50% of the kids who disenrolled? And that would put us, I believe, well on track to be recovering now. Whether there's some trade there, some are new and some are coming back, but there, I know that she said, based, if you subtracted the kindergarten, you got up to 501, and there were over 200 bodies that have re-registered to come back to school.
Okay.
Couple of questions. A couple of questions about social emotional learning. That this is like, I think, one of the very first bullet points you made. Could you just give an example of what like new SEL material resources and training might be or might include? Because I'm just trying to think, you know, how will we know who is struggling emotionally, you know, unless it's extremely obvious, but there's got to be so many.
I can address the materials question, and maybe James or John can talk about your second part of that question. How do we know? So we've been using a program called Second Step in our elementary schools as part of the social emotional learning for a number of years. This year, we added it to our middle schools, so they had Second Step as well, and we added Character Strong as another program to our high schools. So those were the two changes we made in terms of curriculum and materials.
I was just going to say, Second Step, traditionally, it was used in our elementary schools, sometimes by a counselor going into the classroom and giving a lesson, but we purchased it for all of our K-5 teachers so that it could be a part of their day. So it's tied closely to the social emotional learning standards that the state has. Came out with us about 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. All students get that as a tier 1 part of their core instruction on a regular basis. And then for those students that need something more, something additional, our counselors continue to work with students in small groups.
So, and then kind of structurally, I mean, you've got the curriculum, but you also say, where's the time, where's that going to occur in the day? In the elementary, as John was pointing out, rather than always being maybe a counselor pushing in, they're doing a pretty regular morning meetings where they address those things together as a class to kind of get the class have the right mindfulness in the morning. And then at the middle school, they've had a flex period for years, but they've been using that more for the social emotional. And then at the high school, they did a homeroom this year, and they are having discussions about how that might go along with an advisory that stays in place for next year.
Okay, so that actually answers my last question, which was just how does the homeroom time and the classroom time additional support SEL, but that I think is what you're saying. The time's going to be made for those teachers who are going to all have the new curriculum to do it.
James, do you want to mention how we use the panorama data to?
Yeah. So when we think about social emotional health, there are really kind of two big aspects to that. And the first one is the student's outward behavior. And sometimes the student's behavior is the cry for help, and that's what motivates things. But there's also what's going on internally for the student. And so that's one of the reasons that we ask them those questions on the panorama surveys, to try to get an idea of sort of how our students doing. I met this afternoon with the counselors at KPMS to kind of go over their panorama data and take a look at some students who, through their survey responses, have suggested that maybe there's a need for some outreach. So we looked at a couple of students in particular who show that they understand the value of persistence, that they understand what it means to have a growth mindset, that with effort you can learn. And at the same time, their answers suggest that they don't see themselves as capable. And so as the counselors are looking at this list of students who kind of fit that profile, they were seeing most of the students were students that were already on their radar, that they're already working with. And there was one in particular where they thought, wow, that one's a surprise to me. And so now the counselor has an idea of, here's someone that I want to reach out to and just kind of connect with that student and kind of see maybe they just gave funny answers on the survey, but maybe there's something else going on and there's to dig in more.
So those panorama surveys are not anonymous, whereas
So-
Healthy
Youth is absolutely anonymous, yeah.
Okay.
And the panorama survey, there are two parts to that survey. One part, we ask the students about themselves, and we ask them, again, those questions about sort of career growth mindset. We ask them about their kind of social awareness. That one is not anonymous. We also ask them about school safety. Do they have positive relationships with their teachers? Do they feel a sense of belonging with their peers? That one is anonymous, and we don't have access to that. They log in using their student ID so that we get accurate demographic data and we can know what grade they're in and that kind of thing. But we don't actually have access to the direct students' responses in those categories. Those are really school-wide efforts. We don't make school feel safer by targeting the kids who don't feel safe. We make school feel safer by working with all students.
One, I just want to make sure, like, the information that we got on the academic and student well-being and recovery plan, that information that we received and went over tonight is feeding into a kind of a checklist plan that we have to submit to the state to get approved. And the state then, if approved, is releasing ESSER funds to us, or what's on the hook for this plan and getting it approved?
You're really correct. That we cannot spend the federal funds without having an approved plan.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Well, I just want to then say thank you for coming to us with, what do our kids need? Let's talk about our kids and addressing the needs of our kids, and then filling in the logistics behind it on this, I'm sure, checkbox plan, and approaching it like that versus bringing us a list of checkboxes. Yes, we did all this and this and this. So thank you. I'm really excited that we always do, but we've lost track sometimes in this last year of how do we do it versus what are we doing, and I'm so excited to hear about this. So thank you very much on that. James, on the academic measures that you're talking about that we'll be looking at, are you circling in with Aaron on the academies as well? Because I want to make sure as we grow those programs that those kids are all encompassed in all of them.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. And then, I appreciate your comment about the numbers of our minorities here, but regardless of if we have to report to the state or are we still looking internally, even if we have one student and their needs, like what?
Yes.
Like internally we're going to do it. I don't care what the state's asking us to do, but like these are our kids, 1 or 10 or 20, I don't care.
Right.
So, okay.
And so there's what we can look at internally, and because we can look at individual students. But on the other hand, if we think about something that we're going to report out more broadly, then we really need to sort of respect student confidentiality. And if there's one student who meets that criteria at the school, we can't identify them on public-facing documents.
Yeah. And I figured as such, I just wanted to make sure it's just because we're not reporting on it doesn't mean we are not addressing it in our district. Okay. So thank you for the information. I look forward to the report, full report, checkbox and all, next meeting.
I think just one more question, if I could, based on both of you. So it's important why we're doing what we're doing, but the logistic piece is part of it. So you mentioned doing 2 smarter balance. So what's the time commitment on that? Is it taking a significant amount of instruction time out of the classroom to do it twice? Is it a concern that we're doing it twice in a year from that perspective?
It is. The analogy that I've used with other staff is that it's robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Right.
We gained instructional time this year, and we've lost some next year. I'm glad that I wasn't the one who had to make that determination, because I think that was tough. I think that that's going to affect districts very differently across the state. The state is very proud of the fact that the fall tests will be shorter. I hope they're as much shorter as they say they are. I'm not quite sure I believe them. But they should be shorter, and that will help that time.
Okay.
We also do get the results back fairly quickly from those in terms of school staff do, so there's an opportunity to act on that data that normally we don't have, because normally we get it right around the end of the school year.
Okay. And we'll be able to compare fall of 21 to spring of 19? Are we looking at doing that, or are we looking to get a baseline fall of 21 to compare spring of 22?
For most students, it's going to be a baseline.
Okay.
We will have students who are in 8th, 9th grade where we will be able to kind of look back on that. The tool really wasn't designed to be given with that kind of gap, so we're not sure that there's statistical validity to looking at it that way, though we will.
Okay, sure.
But there's certainly going to be some validity in looking at fall to spring.
Okay. Thank you.
The second part of our presentation this evening, I'm old enough that there used to be a letter called a ballot. And it said something that said, congratulations, your friends and neighbors have selected you. And at that point, you were drafted into the service. I'm proud to introduce James as the assessment was reduced this year. His friends and neighbors invited him to step forward. He is waiting for a certain style hat. It could have made him the czar of summer school. And while I'm being facetious, we needed someone that could tie together a significantly extended and expanded summer effort to deal with the very things we've been talking about. And honestly, I think there was no question that people instantly said, they turned and said, we would love to have James help us on that. So James gets to explain kicking or screaming or otherwise, but he is now presenting our plans for something different in the summer of 21, besides just building buildings all summer. And James, if you would take it away from there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had the opportunity to kind of join in when there were a lot of balls already in the air, sort of being juggled by folks with our different summer programs. So I'm going to highlight some of them. I won't get to all of them. As of earlier today, these are now a more detailed look at all these plans are now live on our district website. Over near the top on the far right-hand side, it says Summer Learning. You click there, and there's lots of information about our different programs. A couple that we're going to, kind of call out. We have recovery and extended school year options. Well, we've always had these for students with disabilities, some support based on their individual education plans. They're more important than ever, and I want to make sure that we call attention to that, those recovery and extended school year efforts. We also have Summer SOAR, and we'll get into that again in a little more detail in just a moment. It's available to students who are entering grades 3 through 5. We know that these are the students who lost the most instructional time at elementary, so we really want to focus some efforts there for those students this summer. And then we're fortunate to be able to work with communities and schools, and the Boys and Girls Club to really offer some academic and social supports. And we're really excited about sort of how that's going to adjust a great program that we already had in place, but it's going to be enhanced and made even better. And then we have a variety of credit retrieval and credit acceleration opportunities for students who are currently in grades 8 through 12. So in some cases, there are seniors who are going to be finishing up some of their credits, and in other cases, there are going to be students entering 9th grade who are getting ready for high school, opening up some new opportunities. So I mentioned that this went live on the website earlier today. We've also been doing internal communication with our staff, especially counselors, about what are some of these opportunities for students. And then starting in the next couple of days here, there will be some standalone messages that go to all families about our summer programs. It'll hit social media, school newsletters, and then we'll have the continued news items on the website. So, so we've got communication finally started. It's really exciting to be at that point. I think Tom just stepped away.
Oh, do you need me to translate it? I'll try.
Good job, Natalie. Well, wait. Say that.
Thank you. So our recovery and extended school year options, as it says, they're organized through our student services department. So we have academic recovery sessions available to students generally in the mornings at some of our sites, and then extended school year opportunities. And again, these are determined by the student's individual education plan. So that team involves special education, general education staff, as well as the family. So that happens through July, and we have services will be provided at Harbor Heights, Vaughn, Goodman, PHS, and then our community transition program. So our summer SOAR program, this is one that students are going to be invited based on academic need. We suspect that we will have more interest than we could accommodate in terms of staff. And so we're going to start with those students who, based on their assessments, we can see that they really are going to benefit from this support. We're going to be offering, kind of new this year, a full day experience for these students that'll kind of mirror, in some ways, a full school day. So transportation and meals will be provided in the morning. They'll have an academic session, and as we work with the teachers who are coming on, we're really excited to be kind of putting some of the new resources available from our STEM adoption. STEM Scopes, kind of a big fan in previous life. I helped another district adopt that curriculum. It's got some great supports for helping students connect either reading or math to the real world, to science content, and really kind of help engage without feeling like, here's another worksheet, here's something else, you know. So it's really some new experiences, and it's a great opportunity for teachers to try some of the new lessons they're going to be teaching next year with a really small group of students. In the afternoons, there will be a day camp experience with some of that social support, some of that mentoring that the Boys and Girls Club is great at helping our students with. And so they'll be able to be there, again, for the full day and kind of experience both some academic recovery time and some of that extended social support and just sort of getting some connections with other students. This will be offered in July at both Harbor Heights and at Vaughn. This is also going to be, we're going to be reaching out specifically to our English language learners and bringing them in. If you'll notice, those are also sites where we had extended school year supports, so that we're looking at including our students with disabilities to the largest extent that we can. And so if they're able to participate in one or the other end of this kind of general education day, we're really excited to be able to look at new ways that we can include them and have them be sort of part of that larger experience. We also have Peninsula Internet Academy. This is sort of its last summer before it makes the big transition to the global virtual world. So for students who are entering grades 9 through 12, they've got the opportunity to do some credit retrieval or recovery for courses where they've either received an incomplete or failed a course. They also have the opportunity to do some credit acceleration, so perhaps they want to take a health class ahead of time and free up some room in their schedule to take some other elective classes. So some of those credit retrieval tend to be self-paced, and then they're instructor-led. Generally, when they're sort of at credit acceleration, we're offering something else. Students have the opportunity to complete more than one class over the course of the summer. Again, their work really helps kind of determine that pacing. And officially, our summer session for PIA runs June 24th through August 4th. We actually do have some students who are already working on some of those things right now. There's opportunities if students reach out to counselors to then get connected with PIA and come up with a plan that's appropriate for that. West Sound Tech, we've had some great partnerships with them in the past, in the summer, and we really expanded those now to offer some whole new classes, and then also offer students with the opportunity to complete more than one class during that time. So we offer a summer satellite session. So it's officially West Sound Tech, but it's our teachers held at Gig Harbor High School, getting credit within our district. There are current technical education courses. So we've got a multimedia course, we have a forensic science course. We also have ASL 1 for students who want to get a jump start on sign language and really look at enrolling in the second year of that in the fall. And then our NNVCC program will also be running this summer, which we're very excited about. 2 sessions, so there's an opportunity for students to earn up to a full credit over the course of that by participating in July and August. One really interesting thing that we learned from last year in offering West Sound Tech in a fully virtual setting last year was that it actually worked pretty well for a number of those courses, which I think was not quite what folks were expecting. These are courses that are all day in the same course, which then if the student is at home and is able to work asynchronously and build themselves in some breaks as they need to on some of those days, it actually worked really well for students. And we had a great success rate. So it'll be a hybrid format. Tuesdays and Thursdays, students will be in person at Gig Harbor, and then Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, they'll be working remotely. Most, if not all of those classes will have the opportunity to take at least one field trip to go somewhere and interact in industry and kind of get excited about that. Again, that'll be on their in-person days. We also have a summer learning camp, which is a new approach to kind of a credit recovery piece that we're going to host at Peninsula High School this year. So this will, again, be fully in person. It's in the mornings. And there will be an opportunity for students to sign up for academic content. So perhaps some of our students might be signing up to finish an incomplete that they had in U.S. history. Or other students are going to be, some of our incoming 9th graders are going to be taking sort of a bridge to algebra course where they're getting ready for Algebra 1, really one of the most challenging courses. We look at failure rates really across the nation is Algebra 1 in the 9th grade. So how can we help students get that leg up who really need that support, now more than ever? In addition to that, because summer school signups at high school are not always as robust as we would like them to be, the idea is to roll that in with an interest-based camp. So giving students something that they're really excited about to come there as well, in addition to that kind of graduation carrot. So we'll have camps for students interested in working on drones, camps for students that are really focused around basketball, camps that are focused around whatever else I can get teachers interested in offering a camp for. We'll get to that in a moment. So the idea here is to provide, again, something that we know that students need, along with something that students want, in the hopes of being able to serve more students more effectively. Again, 2 sessions running in July, and then this one, the second session, starts at the end of July and runs
Maybe we get you certified if you're interested in offering some of those interest-based.
Absolutely.
We can teach a lot of things.
So, lots to be excited about. I do want to acknowledge 3 important challenges here. The first is the availability of instructional staff. It's been a hard year for students. It's been a hard year for families. It's also been a hard year for our teachers and other instructional staff. And so really, we've been pleased so far this week with the number of applications that we've seen, but we know that the need is large enough that we're going to need even more. So we do expect that to be a challenge. I've been working with the transportation department almost every day. We expect to have some constraints around bus drivers. It's hard because we don't yet know all of the students that we need, or who will be able to attend. We also don't yet know where they all live, which is, leaves a lot up in the air about routing But we're already sort of preparing for what are our options. We might be looking at some long bus rides for some of these students, just based on driver availability.
Jane,
And-
on that note, I
Yeah.
tease people a bit when they want to teach, but if somebody's watching and has an interest in being a substitute teacher, or if they're not certified, is there a possibility that they can assist?
Absolutely, yeah. Reach out and we absolutely do that. We often have substitute teachers who are involved in our summer programs. We like to encourage that. Our Human Resources Department, I'm sure, would love to get some more folks signed up and participating. The last piece, again, is making sure that we're able to match our support that we're providing to the students who need it most. So not just necessarily opening it up to everybody, but making sure that we have a really targeted look. And that's hard, because sometimes our students who need it the most, they might not be available in the summer for any number of different reasons. And so we do expect that to be a challenge as teams are starting to reach out to these students and invite them to different summer programs.
And if a graduating senior wanted to come back for that summer, could we contact you?
We can keep it busy.
We offered to talk to her, she's gonna do it again. Maybe.
Drone class,
Drone class did sound good.
they should get certification.
We do have questions or,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Sure.
okay, I'll start. So, thank you, Czar James, forever known as. The retrieval that you talked about, either through the PIA, the summer learning camp, all that. So if I'm a senior and I have an incomplete and I'm not allowed to graduate or am graduating, can I theoretically make up that course over the summer?
Yes.
Or finish that complete and then have my graduation or my,
And that's some of our students that are working on PIA summer session, but right now, is they're working on finishing up something that had gone wrong earlier, and they want to be ready to walk at graduation.
okay, fantastic. You said PIA, so I think I understand the PIA is kind of evolving up into the Global Virtual Academy.
Right.
So if this was next summer, would it be called the
Then we'll
Global
call it
Virtual
right.
Academy, but we're calling it PIA?
Right.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that was one and the same, and I'm glad to see it that program evolving. The West Sound Tech, it's virtual and it will be a hybrid this year. But you said one of the benefits of being virtual last year was that kids were able to build in some breaks. If you've got hybrid, they might not be able to build in that break, right? Because they're expected to be in class Tuesday and Thursday.
So in two plus years ago, it was in person. Then last year it had to be fully virtual, just based on where we were at. And then this year, based on feedback from the teachers, and then looking at student success rates in the courses, really thinking that hybrid might be the way to go. So the teachers are still able to schedule in breaks, and certainly do as they look at an 8 to 3 o'clock class. But it's not as self-paced on the student end.
Okay.
If the student wants to say that, well, if I don't work as well in the morning, I work better in the evening, that they'll have to kind of stick on a school schedule for 2 of those
At least
days.
those days, yeah. So, depending on availability, anyone can come in and do West Sound Tech.
Correct.
Okay.
In fact, they actually sign up, the link is from our website, but they actually end up signing up and registering through West Sound Tech.
Yeah.
And then they don't actually go there, they go to Gig Harbor instead.
Yeah. Okay. And then, lastly, the summer learning camp. So one of the things that was stuck out to me in that, what you said, was really getting kids, 8th graders, ready for maybe Algebra 1 in 9th grade, which I think is phenomenal, because that is one of the toughest classes we see kids struggling in. So an 8th grader from Harbor Ridge, Kopachuck, any of those could go and be a part of the summer learning program and get ready for Algebra 1.
Right, and thank you for helping me clarify that. So our West Sound Tech program that's at Gig Harbor is open to students across the district. In fact, it's actually open to any student whose district is served by West Sound Tech.
Okay.
The Peninsula High School Learning Camp, that's available to students across the district. We just happen to be housing it at PHS.
Okay, so 8th grade, good. And then lastly, all of our summer costs in terms of transportation, teachers, all that, that's ESSER funds because it's a kind of a retrieval type of,
By and large, I'm gonna say yes. Now, the West Sound Tech has a
That's-
funding advantage. They're actually funded for summer programs.
okay.
So it's a significant advantage to us to work with them. And they are funded by the state for that program. But by and large, the answer to your question is yes. We
Okay.
will be using ESSER funds.
Thank you, and thank you for putting this in front of us.
Would would those ESSER funds then, because if it's gonna be considered helping them catch up under the plan, would the ESSER funds also pay for the transportation costs, cover the salary of the bus drivers, the fuel, and all the things that go involved, all of that, so that's not on the school district?
For all practical purposes, yes, with the exception that we can only spend the money once. And that, what I mean by that is we're gonna have a lot more. Some funds are making up for lost funds, some funds are adding programs, and when we run out of money, we'll be funding those through the district.
Thank you.
Will any of these programs require fees to be paid by the participating? So they're all covered fully 100%? Okay.
And the summer learning camp, is it gonna be so the academic portion, will it be the same for every session? Or will there be like an algebra focused one and a biology focused one and read play?
We'll have different class options for students to sign up, and that's one of the reasons that the registrations will actually go through the counselor so that we can make sure that the student is signing up for a class that's really something that they need. But in the first session, a student might be taking biology, and in the second session, they might be taking a U.S. history class. But they'd only be taking one during each of those two sessions.
And these are not for credit, correct? This is just to prep or
These would be for credit.
They are for credit.
Correct.
What's the credit?
So it'll depend on the course,
Okay.
but it's a half credit per session.
Okay.
Because it's a full day.
So if
really
you
trying to
do
be
an algebra focused one as as a rising freshman, how does that impact your freshman year then? What is your math going to look like?
So that's one that counselors would be involved in, because that might not be the best mechanism to sort of advance beyond and go from an 8th grader in 8th grade math, take this kind of shortened credit retrieval focused algebra class. That might not be sufficient preparation for geometry, and so that's something that school staff would really want to work with students on an individual basis to figure out what's the best opportunity for you.
It's not so much designed for acceleration as for recovery.
Okay, but to that point, I was wondering if a student wasn't necessarily behind, could they take a class in order to free up space in their schedule? You referred to that, like if they had a conflict with two things, could they take one in the summer? And
By design, PIA is probably the better option for that student.
Sorry, that's what I meant.
Yes.
The PA, yeah.
Yes.
And that is an option, you don't
Yeah,
have to
absolutely.
necessarily be behind in credits, you can
Correct.
advance. Okay.
Correct.
But that's always been an option, and a lot of students take advantage of that.
Right, okay.
If I could jump in on that one as well, the West Sound Tech Summer Academy does offer CCFE and it does offer health. We know the sophomore year is one of the more crowded years, and so being able to relieve one or both of those courses through the West Sound Tech Summer Academy allows not just an online experience, but in this case, for the summer of 21, a hybrid experience for students to relieve some of the pressure on that most crowded year. Environmental science and other academic areas, it's not just straight CTE. All of those are classified as CTE, but they do cross over and take care of some of the other academic credits as well in the core areas.
Thanks.
Can I clarify or something that now I asked? So if I'm a parent or a student that wants to get more information on any of these programs, it's up on the website right now and probably updated as you build out courses with
Yes.
soccer or I keep being soccer or whatever, basket weaving, whatever those camps would be. So that will be updated. But if I want to sign up for a course, a student wants to sign up, you go through the counselor, except for West Sound Tech.
Except for West Sound Tech and PIA.
And PIA, okay.
One of
thank
the
you.
columns on the web page shows how is it targeted? So is it
Okay.
are you going to be invited, or is it open enrollment, or whatever?
So it's up on the website.
Yeah.
I can go up there. Thank you.
And that summer learning camp is open to anyone who wants to go, but targeted to kids who need it the most? Like, is that a priority schedule or? Okay. So if I were to call tomorrow and say, hey, I really think my kid could use some extra help, he'd be put on a wait list or balanced out against?
As we're working through that, one thing that we're still waiting on as teacher applications are coming in is knowing exactly which classes we can offer.
Okay.
And so right now, anyone is on a waiting list as we kind of look at which specific classes do we have teachers who are endorsed to
Okay,
offer.
but someone is answering the phone and answering these questions right now, taking
Right.
names. Okay.
Chuck, you have anything? How about you, Tyson?
I don't have anything. I
He's
mean,
graduated.
I don't gotta worry about anything.
Senioritis?
He wasn't interested in the drone class though.
Yes.
We offer.
Fair enough, fair enough.
So, this isn't for you, okay, or for the, so you can be done, I guess. So,
Thanks, James.
so 6 weeks ago, finish up on my comments from earlier, which I think this is okay, because we're talking about our youngest learners most at risk. 6 weeks ago, when the governor came out and said we're changing the distancing to 3 feet, and then threw all those extra things on us. What I was trying to read earlier was that today OSPI came out and said, if you need to distance less than 6 feet, you can. If you need to distance less than 3 feet in classroom, you can. Thank you. And it is allowable to not distance any further than 6 feet, and allowable not to distance 3 feet. And so we were all excited when 6 weeks ago that happened. We were thinking we could bring more kids back. And so I got 2 things I just want to discuss. This is the first one, is if we were looking at what the governor said, hey, well, let's bring our kids back, but he had the 6 feet and then the 3 feet in there. And then today, OSPI came out and said, those are just flexible and for guidance only. Why would we not now be able to, at least for our elementary school, like by May 31st, 2 weeks from now, eliminate the hybrid and just bring back at least our elementary school kids? Since OSPI today said that 3 feet, 6 feet is flexible, could our school district do that based on the guidance that we got from him today? So that's one thing I wanted to bring up.
Short version, no, for 2 reasons. One is, all of today's announcements, for example, make some assumptions that the guidance for the fall that's being put out will be factoring in the vaccinations, the vaccinations of adults and the staff, and the vaccinations of the community at large, and the rates going down. So they're making the assumption right now that this peak, this current peak that's been going up has stopped and will be going down, and nobody knows exactly what it is for the fall, but they are based on the assumption that by the fall we will have a significant difference than where we were last summer and last fall. The second piece is that I think early on, with last March and shortly thereafter, you heard the governor and others talk about this pivot. School districts could pivot quickly. If the rate was going up, we could pivot to remote, and if it was going down, we could pivot to in-district. One of the things we have proved to ourselves and to the world is that's not true. This is a monstrous machine of $140 million business and people, staff, et cetera, and contracts. So the reality in answering your question is that you simply can't make that change fast. So if we announced today that our intent was to return everybody at these grades to full-time 5-day a week, it would take us quite some time to actually work out the logistics and stay within the rules. I think the last reason I would give on that is that when you heard, I think a few weeks back when we were talking about that 3-foot, one of the issues is if we took the afternoon and morning session and put them back together at grades 3 through 5 right now, we could do that with one single exception. We don't have enough classrooms. And as soon as we did that, we're basically in trouble of trying to figure out how to make it work and stay within all the rules. So whether it's the 6-foot stuff that we talked about, the 3-foot was 3-foot, the 6-foot at lunch, and others was really complicated. the issue of the number of classrooms, the number of teachers, and try to do that and make it work throughout the system. At the secondary, for all practical purposes, is our class size numbers that we could now accommodate without having those in separate places and separate ways of doing it. So
I guess I would ask, how are you going to pull it off if you can't do it 2 weeks from now? How are you going to be able to pull it off in September?
Boarding
in
elementary
the fall.
schools.
Oh,
Boarding elementary schools, the voters.
hold on. That's ridiculous.
Sorry, Art.
No,
No.
Go for it.
Sorry about that. That was an aha moment, thank you. Can we rewind? Can we rewind that? Race.
Okay, I think this is an aside. You bring up an interesting point that in the fall, we will have, in most of our 10 elementary schools, we'll have extra classrooms. So as I'm looking for, if we have a 6-foot feeding problem of how do kids eat and maintain 6-foot differences, we have places to look at that we don't have right now. And it's largely because as we open up Evergreen, Artendale, Swiftwater, and of course Pioneer will be fully used and the classrooms aren't being used. We have space that we never had before. And it's a delight to be able to say that.
And our IT put some static in that little section.
Yeah. That's why there's a delay.
Okay, so the only other thing with everything that came out today, and it was like a whirlwind, with the CDC saying what masks are required if you've been vaccinated, either social distancing, President said the same thing, that today the governor came out, lifted masks for everything, for the most part, so I can go to Fred Meyer, pharmacy, restaurant, bowling, pretty much anywhere without a mask based off the governor's announcement today, except hospitals, transportation, and schools. I certainly understand hospitals and transportation but I totally disagree with him on schools. I think with 90% of our staff being vaccinated, we did the antigen testing last year that showed our youngest learners are not at risk. And I know that this has to be a school board agenda item added later, so be it. But I know that, you see and you hear school boards across the country voting to eliminate the mask requirement in their school district. And I just feel silly that we have to sit here wearing a mask, but I can go to Fred Meyer Bowling and Restaurant and not have to wear one. And I don't know if that's something that we'd have to talk about at a future board meeting as an agenda item, but I would welcome, I haven't had this conversation with anybody, this all happened today. Would the board be willing to sort of push back on OSPI and go with CDC and others and say, we want to eliminate the mask requirement? And would that be a discussion we could have right now, or would that need to be an agenda item? That's what I'm asking.
I would say that one should be an agenda item, because that would actually, you'd be looking towards making a decision
Okay.
as a group. I would say right now, the quick counter is that we're trying to run clinics in the schools. We're trying to encourage vaccination and support vaccination, because ultimately, as you see evolving right now in the CDC, is the belief that once you can hit a certain level of vaccination, we can remove the masks and be safe. So the way to get there is to get our kids vaccinated, at least all who the parents want vaccinated. And for those parents and kids that choose not to do that, there will be a large enough population to be able to allow the schools to operate without masks. So we're heading for the same place, but trying a different route to get there, and that's maximizing.
Well, just remember last year we pushed for local control. We pushed back against Dr. Chen, asking for local control that we're across the bridge, and not everybody comes from Tacoma to Gig Harbor to have a hamburger, like he said. But to just be able to say, the governor's threshold for moving back to phase 3 next week is 70% vaccination, and we're at 90% vaccination in the Peninsula School District, and 90+% of our recent parent poll wants their kids back in school. So it'd be interesting to poll, maybe before we get this on the agenda item, but maybe to poll parents to say, would you be comfortable with the school district eliminating the mask requirement? I don't know, but I would welcome the opportunity for the board to have the discussion, so just, it could fail, but,
One complicating factor is that we actually don't have access to know who's vaccinated and who's not. We know some, but we don't mandate vaccination for either the staff or students, and some may be vaccinated and some definitely are not. So I'll get you the numbers that we have and what we know through HR, but I just want to caution you that right now, I don't have access to numbers to say.
and I read recently they're gonna get ready to do vaccinations for 12-year-olds.
So a staff member does not have to say whether they're vaccinated or not.
So I sort of had angst about that, because how can they refuse to get vaccinated, and the school district has provided ample opportunity for them to get vaccinated with our various off-sites, all the free places you can get it, Walgreens, Bartell's, everywhere. They've had an opportunity to get vaccinated. If they refuse to, and then refuse to come to work, I just don't see why we wouldn't be required to say, why don't you want to come back to work? Well, I haven't been vaccinated. Well, you had every opportunity to get vaccinated. So I mean, I have some angst around that, just that you can't ask a teacher. So we're being told we have to wear masks based on the governor, but we're not allowed to ask them if they've been vaccinated. I just don't think that's right.
Then we can ask, they don't have to tell us.
Okay.
They're also, the colleges have, by and large, are now requiring vaccination to be on campus next fall. But if you look at the conditions it would be, if you had an objection for religious purposes, medical purpose, or your personal interest, you don't have to give an interest. You can choose to opt out and not be vaccinated, still be on campus. So they're estimating that it will take 2 to 3 years before all the hurdles would be passed with a virus, with vaccine, in order to be able to mandate that students, for example, be vaccinated as they are for other required vaccinations. So it's out at least a couple of years. If I required you right now to vaccinate your child to attend public school, I'm doing that under the emergency approvals that were put out and not under a final approval of vaccine. So therein is the conundrum that's facing, and virtually all of the health offices are telling the school districts that we do not believe it will be sooner than 2 years at the earliest for mandatory vaccination. That's my best explanation, Mr. Olson.
Anyone else have any comments? Okay.
Yeah, just, I want to say that I understand your concern. It's very complex. And your analogy that it's a large machine might be better accepted to say it's a large ship. And you can't turn it on a dime. It takes some planning before you can make that turn. But it's very confusing right now. I hear you with the CDC, with the governor. When you travel around, and Lori can attest to this, wherever you go, there's a different rule, and it's all based on science in each of these different locations. So its interpretation of the science is really confusing. And being in the medical profession, hearing from the doctors and the nurses, and it's very confusing again. So I think we're getting away from it. I think we'll be able to shed these things soon. There's a lot of science that's not being publicized. You know, they're talking about the vaccines, but if you've had COVID, you're actually got better immunities than having the vaccine. So, and that's not being talked about.
Mr. Olson, I'm proud to say that you and we have done it in 2 hours.
Perfect. Love it.
Okay, I think it's our next board meeting 2 weeks from tonight will be a regular board meeting. Thank you very much for all your hard work with putting all this together, and we look forward to seeing the plan.